Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Majority Show, coming at you live every Wednesday from Majority Powers and wherever David is, actually back in Scotland. Anyways, look, we're here at 7 p.m. every Wednesday on YouTube, Twitter, now called X, and Facebook. Many of you watching from tonight. Let's see. Here with co-hosts David Griffiths and with Mary Devlin, of course. How are you, David? You've just come back from the United States. How was that?
It was very pleasant indeed. I met several extremely nice people, and to each of whom I explained the critical need for the UK to remain intact, and they all agreed. So that was good. So it was a great trip, and I really do hope to visit again soon. So yeah, great.
Yes, it's good. And did you go travelling or something?
Well, the 1 week I had plans to go travelling. I was in northern Arizona, and I'd planned to go to the Grand Canyon and see all around there. But the 2 days it snowed, and there was very, very low cloud, and I couldn't have seen a thing. I would have been quite interested to see the Grand Canyon in the snow, but I didn't really fancy driving in that. So, but I went around a lot, mostly around Arizona, with a brief stop in New York. So it was terrific. Yeah, really, really good.
That's very good. Right. And what are you going to be talking about tonight?
Well, tonight I will be looking at the rather alarming, from the point of view of the pro-UK anti-nationalist majority, the rather alarming slump in Labour's polling in Scotland, and what Anna Sarwar, where it leaves him, in fact.
Well, that is a big question everyone is asking now, Mary. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Right, what are you going to be talking about?
Well, tonight I'm going to be talking about how, despite John Swinney's claims, Scots don't actually want more immigration.
Well, that's we know that anyway, right? And of course, we'll all be talking about Scottish Parliament's refusal to talk about the Sandy Peggie case and J.D. Vance's criticism of Scotland's hate speech laws.
And we have Zoomer of the Week.
Yay! So we'll be back with all that and much more. Just a few seconds. Right, welcome back to the Majority Show. Thank you for joining us tonight and Wednesday, 19th of February. New Year is well underway. This is Scotland's number one politics and chat from an anti-nationalist perspective, and our aim is the majority's aim is a thriving Scotland without the toxic nationalism that is strangling Scotland's potential. I'm the host, Mark Devlin, and I'm here tonight with my co-host, David Griffiths, and with Mary Devlin as well. As always, a huge thanks to our friends at United Against Separation Facebook page, where many of you are watching from tonight.
And remember, sharing is caring. The number one thing you can do is to like the show on YouTube. And even if you don't subscribe, drop a like. But if you can subscribe, please do so. All helps to increase the reach of the show at the click of one button.
And as usual, I will be managing the relentless flow of comments, so please keep them short and snappy. I'll try to put as many up on screen as I can.
Right, okay, so let's get right into it. Let me see. Most of you already know about the employment tribunal that's currently taking place. I don't know actually where it's taking place, but it's between long-term nurse Sandy Peggie, who claimed that she was unlawfully harassed by being made to share a changing room with transgender Dr. Beth Upton, and the other side is NHS Fife. I'm not sure if it's actually been held in Fife. Whereas do you know, David, where the tribunal has actually been held?
You know, I don't. I haven't even looked to see where it's being held. No.
Yeah, I don't think that matters too much. Anyway, but you would think that a matter of this national importance that involves a Scottish government policy that's being reported in every TV station, newspaper, all across social media would merit discussion in the Scottish Parliament. How wrong would you be? See, the way it works is that on non-important matters such as resolutions about Palestine or bike lanes or making gender policies that nobody cares about, well, we'll see, they do care about them. They think nobody cares about. Scottish Parliament always seems to have the answers, but when it comes to issues that actually affect people, often as a result of these crazy policies, they seem suspiciously quiet. Questions about potholes, train services, ferries, slipping educational standards, and are all brushed aside. This week, Alison Johnson, the Parliament's presiding officer, refused to allow questions to be asked in the Parliament about the Peggie case, and the question, this is the question we want to know: does a woman have? Well, actually, it doesn't matter whether you want to. This is the question. It doesn't matter whether you want to know what the answer is or not. We'll certainly want to know what the government's answer is to it, but certainly the fact that there should be some debate on it. This question: does a woman have a right to get dressed for work in a changing room with other biological women and not men who claim to be women? This is one of the questions of our age, I think, and it's not being discussed there. Why can't it be discussed, David?
Well, to my mind, the SNP and, of course, its obedient poodle, Alison Johnson, are terrified of any discussion of this item, and that's because even the most cursory examination of this item would highlight an uncomfortable fact for the SNP, and that is that several of Scotland's public institutions, such as, indeed, the NHS 5, are behaving as if the scrapped, blocked SNP Gender Recognition Reform Bill was actually on the statute book, which it's not. Now, in disciplining Sandy Peggie, NHS 5 has made a decision on the basis not only that self-ID is legally enforceable in Scotland, but additionally that it supersedes the UK Equalities Act. Now, the UK Equalities Act is Westminster legislation that compels employers to provide single-sex spaces for employees, particularly women, particularly when they're disrobing or changing. Now, in denying Sandy Peggie this right, in order to appease a self-identified trans woman who is a biological male, as we all know, NHS flagrantly breached the Equalities Act. Unquestionably, the Equalities Act couldn't be clearer. You must provide single-sex spaces for women. If you fail to do so and you encourage a biological male to be in that space and you start to discipline a female for saying, hang on, I'm entitled to a single-sex space, you are denying her equalities rights. The SNP doesn't want the embarrassment of having to acknowledge this blatant fact. They'd prefer their public bodies to carry on doing what they're doing, which is this pretense that self-ID is actually a feature of Scottish life, and that any pesky complaining females who insist on exercising their right to single-sex space are quietly shoved aside and disciplined.
Well, yes. Go ahead, keep going.
That's exactly what's happening. So this is a very, very flagrant contravention of a female employee's rights, and it is an absolute disgrace. And on this Friday, she could well be disciplined further by her employer, notwithstanding the fact that this tribunal is going ahead. I mean, it's like an Orwellian nightmare for this poor woman. It is an absolute scandal, really.
It really is. It is quite something. And of course, the scandal on top of the scandal is that the Scottish Government refuses to discuss it. Of course, this self-ID nonsense was a big feature of Nicola Sturgeon's tenure. It was one of the defining moments. We all remember that video of her was in the gym or something like that. I don't know if we even used that in our titles, we used to use it in our titles, where she was saying that trans women were women for the purposes of going into prisons and all that type of stuff, and was just going round in circles all the time. He says, well, why are they in prisons? Why shouldn't they be in the male prison? All this nonsense anyway. It's actually so illogical that I can't even say it. Anyway, nonetheless, Scottish Government likes, though, to make statements when it suits them. Here is Neil Gray saying that he supports NHS 5.
Sandy Peggie's been threatened with a sack by NHS 5. Do you have any concerns about how she's being treated?
So I think that's obviously a process for NHS 5 to deal with. I'm not here to comment on that, and I don't think it would be fair or right for me to do so. The process that's underway, both in terms of the tribunal and any disciplinary process, is live, so it wouldn't be fair for me to comment on that.
Do you accept that the government's lack of clarity on single-sex spaces is what has led to this situation?
We've provided guidance to the system in terms of making sure that they are...
What is that guidance exactly?
We've provided the guidance that
makes... What is that guidance, though? What exactly does the guidance
to ensure that they are applying... All public bodies should be applying the Equality Act, to respect the terms of the Equality Act, both in terms of single-sex spaces and trans rights, and making sure that those are respected and as they are within the Equality Act, and we expect public bodies to...
This is non-answer.
How does that work?
It's very clear, as you guys have been saying. Why have we got this situation then?
Well, obviously there's a live tribunal process underway, and that needs to be respected, and I won't be commenting further on that. That's for the process to take its course, and I want that to take its course before we can consider anything further off of that.
Health Secretary, J.K. Rowling backed calls for you to, quote, grow a spine and sack the leadership of NHS 5. Will you grow a spine and do exactly that?
I think the process has got to be respected, and both in terms of any disciplinary process that there may be, and indeed the employment tribunal, and obviously we'll take considerations off the back of that, and I've got no further comment to make.
I mean, actually, I didn't actually watch that before the show, and I'm quite flabbergasted by the response there. It's like, we gave guidance. What's the guidance? No guidance.
Yeah. He doesn't know what the
here's
guidance
the law. Well, we want to abide by the law, equalities law, but the trans people have to have something, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then all this, it's just like, what this guy's, I think that guy is an utter moron. He really is. It's just like, and then he's like, well, we abide by the process and all that. It's like, what process?
Exactly.
Absolutely, it's insane.
And not only that, but when he was asked, okay, if the guidance is clear, why have you got this situation right now? Well, there's the tribunal going on, so I don't want to influence it. Hang on, that's not an answer to the question. The question is, why is the guidance not clear? It's got nothing to do with the tribunal, whatever. They're two completely.
No, it's just absolute utter nonsense. It's like, well, isn't the question your government put these guidelines in place? So why can't we talk about them now?
This morning,
Dr. Ross wasn't having any of that.
He couldn't comment on the Sandy Peggie case because it's a live employment tribunal. But then he went on in the same interview to give full confidence in the board of NHS 5, who are the other party in the employment tribunal. So can Neil Gray tell us why he's backing the bureaucrats on the board and not a nurse with 30 years service to the NHS?
Cabinet Secretary. I'm not going to provide any further comment to a live tribunal process, and I think it's important that we support the work of NHS 5 delivering for the citizens of 5 in improving their health and social care services.
Oh, jeez. Oh, I mean, come on. It's pretty hideous. That is there. I mean, that seems to be the attitude when a question is actually asked.
Yeah.
Now, the situation, though, has been that when the Scottish Conservatives, mainly, basically wanted put in a bunch of questions. I think they put in 6 questions that they wanted to be asked of the Parliament in the First Minister's questions section or wherever it is, and they were all refused. And many people have been complaining about that because where's the debate? If there's no questions being asked, well, how can there be any debate? That about with there. And now Douglas Ross later also stood up and said, what's going on? And I urge you to have a look at that video if you can find it. It's not that difficult to find.
Well, Marco Polo's got it.
Right, yes. And we're basically, he's saying, why can't we ask these questions? Everyone's asking these questions around of Scotland. Why are you not letting us answer these questions? And there's no response other than Alison Johnson, I think, is being a stooge of the SNP and the Greens. The Greens, of course, primarily behind this gender ID, self-ID nonsense. Now, situation is so bad that there was, I saw this Jim Spence, who is a commentator in the Courier, said on Twitter, I think there's a genuine emerging danger of continued existence of Holyrood. Now, this isn't a guy who is like, like one of us who's been in this abolish Holyrood thing for a while. This is just your ordinary kind of guy who looking at this situation and seeing what's going on. He says many who supported the Scottish Holyrood are completely scunnered by the self-congratulatory arrogance, which has anaesthetised it to public concerns. We managed without it before. We can again unless it shapes up. This was followed by hundreds of comments agreeing with him. Yet, it seems to me that every single party is so scared of a minority of nationalists that they won't even talk about reforming, abolishing Holyrood, but not even reforming Holyrood. I mean, I just don't know what they're scared of. First of all, it really is time to say there's no path for a minority of separatists in one part of the UK to break up the entire country. That's the basics. And once you've passed that, then you can say to people, where there's if you get nowhere forward with this, why are we scared of you? Yeah. Right? This is the thing here. No other country submits itself to this kind of masochism. Yeah. Anyway, what about the fear? What is this fear? Is it, David, they used to say that Boris will turn it around for us, or Brexit will turn it around for us. how? Okay, close the Parliament and you say to people, "Here's £10 billion to public services, that you could have instead." That's a win.
Yeah,
That's not a difficult discussion, I don't think.
I agree. The fear appears to be based on a reaction to the fallout from the 1979 devolution referendum, when Scotland voted by a very narrow majority for this assembly, as it was called back then. But because of a clause inserted by the then Westminster Labour government, the votes didn't reach the 40% threshold.
Yes.
It was a little bit arbitrary to put that in all honesty. It was only because the Labour Party was terrified of it happening. But it did appear that, there was some sentiment in Scotland at the time that, the democratic wishes hadn't been, if you like, fulfilled. And so I suspect a lot of this is the feeling that as a result of that, 18 years later, there was another referendum, and of course it was very, very overwhelming, the majority for devolution and for a Scottish Parliament, and it was referred to as the settled will of the Scottish people and all that stuff. And I think there has been a lot of pushback against ever being seen to be thwarting anything that is approaching nationalist or breakaway sentiment. I think that's what it is. I think the UK government is terrified of inflaming nationalist fervour by, if you like, seeking to squash it. I think that's the problem.
But they did the opposite. What they do is they basically encourage, oh yeah, here, have a referendum, here, have this. Let's just take our country as let's not value the breakup of our country at all. Yeah. And this has to stop at some point. And this is a good point to stop as any, in my opinion. Taking away the crappy little talking shop, it's not going to make a nationalist resurgence. They can barely get 300 people in a march, and that includes the Dugs. I mean, really, the majority of Scots will be relieved to see. I mean, what do we get out of this? We got Sturgeon, right? Salmond, Humza Yousaf, and John Swinney. This is not a good result, I think. So we want to save the money, but the thing is, all these parties are too cowardly. Now, I mean, the thing that disturbed me, I think before you went away, we talked a little bit about this and reform and how they weren't actually grabbing this issue, which would give them a lot of votes, certainly, I think, if they said, yeah, we want to do it, not even abolish, just we want to review this system. And I think a lot of people might go, all right, okay, I might go for that. Tories who otherwise might not go there, for example. But they seem to be all these parties seem to be too cowardly just even to bring the subject up. Do you think that, David, would you change your mind if Reform said that they were going to abolish Holyrood?
Right, in terms of changing my mind, bear one thing in mind about Reform. I'm not opposed intrinsically to Reform. I very much see the attraction of Reform. I understand it completely. It's a populist party in nature. It's standing on policies that are fundamentally going to appeal to people's common sense, and I totally get the appeal. The only issue I have with Reform is I don't believe, as I said when Thomas was on the show 2 weeks ago, I don't believe they can attract votes in sufficient numbers to do anything other than aid the SNP. And that's my only problem with Reform. If they start polling, Thomas was trying to make this point, Reform second in these constituencies in polling, so why aren't they making them the tactical voting choice? Simply because they're never going to get sufficient votes to win it. That's why. If it's not about their policies, it's more about if they can demonstrate an ability to attract votes in sufficient numbers, and I agree with the policies, sure, I'll endorse them. It's the same as the last election, the Conservative Party in the election just gone. I couldn't endorse them because they weren't going to win seats. It was obvious. And that's the reason, isn't it? It wasn't a question of any issue with their policies, because fundamentally I am, particularly economically, I am right of centre. I'm certainly not left of centre when it comes to economics. So, that's my issue with Reform. But I don't believe as yet, given that Reform hasn't yet won a single council seat in Scotland, I find it very, very difficult to take them seriously as contenders in constituencies in Holyrood. I don't believe they'll win a single constituency next year. I don't believe they'll come second in a single constituency. I genuinely don't. Now, conversely, of course, people are attracted to Reform's populist policies because they feel they want change. The problem is, by voting Reform in Scotland, you won't get change. All you'll get, in almost all certainty, is more SNP, and that doesn't represent change in the slightest. So that's my problem with Reform rather than their policy. But yeah, what I would say as a caveat to that, I would certainly endorse Reform on the list in some regions, like, for example, West Scotland, Glasgow, Central Scotland, where I believe they'll do well, probably Mid Scotland and Fife also. So yeah, I'll happily endorse them there, because we've talked about this privately. They have some candidates I think would be assets to Holyrood. So yeah, it's not so much their policies; it's more show me that you can get that critical mass to move forward. Then I'll
Yes, well, I suppose you take that from your poll perspective. I actually go from the other perspective, and we're not going to any length because it's not really, the show's not supposed to be about this. But I think the policy stance of the party is very weak. They came out with this nonsense about taxing windmills and solar farms the other day, and it was just like what are you doing? What are you doing?
My concern with reform is not so much the policies; it's about their ability to actually enact the policies.
Right. So these are the type of questions that are not being addressed by the party either in the UK or in Scotland, certainly. So basically, of course, that will be the topic of many another show as we do that. So,
Mark, can I just interrupt?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Sorry, we've got a question from Bruce. He's tried a couple of times. He keeps asking how to join. Can't see how to join. I don't know. He must be watching the show.
What are you trying to join
Bruce,
there, Bruce?
Can someone please tell Bruce how to join?
Right. Okay, Mary, you can deal with that probably in the private comments. But you just can subscribe to us on YouTube is probably the easiest way to get us all the time and get alerts and so on. That's great. But if it's something else, just send us a wee email, mark@themajority.scot, and that'll be fine as well. Right. Okay, we'll be back in a second. We're going to talk about the collapse of free speech. In fact, it's not even speech in some cases. Silent speech in Scotland.
Prayer.
Well, no, it's prayer. What is prayer? It's speech. Anyway, we'll be back in a second for that. But first, if you like us, you're sick of nationalist lies, I'd like to ask you to help us build Majority Truthbot. It's actually going quite well. The Truthbot is where are we? Truthbot. Okay, let's build the Majority Truthbot. So far, we have raised, or you have raised, I should say, £774 out of our £1,200 goal for the Truthbot, which is probably enough to get us started, to be honest. But it'd be nice to have a little bit more to keep it going.
To get us finished.
Get it finished, yes, that's the point. Okay, so just basically what the bot does is it's going to actually, I thought of a new way to do it. So let's say you're on Twitter and you see some nationalist lie. You're like, oh, I could write a big long post about that. No, never fear. The Majority Truthbot will do it for you. So you basically just put in @Majority Truthbot, and then it will scan the thread, and then it will put the reply back. All truth.
Automatically.
Yes, automatically, as they say. Anyway, so no more of this nonsense. Try to automate some of the parts as well for the claim of right nutters and Gers deniers. But anyway, so if you do like this idea of automating the truth and sticking it to the nationalists with technology, then please do donate. And you can donate there, it says, on our website. You can go to any page on our website, there's a wee donate button, and that goes right to it. That's great. I know that some people went to that and it didn't go to the right place, but we still did get your donation, so that is fine.
Thank you.
You can also do a super sticker. Thanks. And we had a few of those last week, but I didn't notice them in the comments, so we try and highlight them if we do see them. Right. Thank you all for anyone who has donated. Now, J.D. Vance apparently was a hillbilly before and seems to become an international statesman. An international security conference in Munich, J.D. Vance, US President, referenced Scotland's safe access zone law as an example of free speech in retreat. The American Vice President told POFE's delegates that the Scottish Government letter had been sent out to residents within the safe access zone, stating that private prayer in their homes would amount to breaking the law. Now, I don't know why I didn't get the clip for this, but anyway. He said the Scottish Government was said to have been distributing letters to houses labelled in the safe access zones, warning that even private prayer may amount to breaking the law. Now, did you actually watch the speech, David?
I didn't watch the speech, but I have read pretty much a transcript of it, and really, you can see what's happening here. Trump and co believe the UK, particularly Scotland's in the grip of a woke nightmare, and they're trying to use restrictions on prayer and belief, faith as the ultimate. Oh my God, look at what they're trying to clamp down on. So imagine the US government holding up Scottish law as an example of Orwellian totalitarianism. Really, it's just terrible, really.
Well, I mean, I think it's part of the idea, though, is like we're paying for your defence from the American perspective. We're paying for a lot of your stuff, and we've seen through all of these programs, for example, you've seen AID USAID that have been cut. Things to Afghanistan and pot making in Afghanistan and all this type of stuff, and as well as money to international media agencies, many of which have been producing negative information about the US government. You've seen how they've been cutting billions, literally billions of in funding. But I think this is what's driving them. Really, they're saying, "Look, we're not just going to put up with this anymore." Basically, if we're paying for stuff, we either don't pay, and you can do what you like in your woke nightmare as you described it, or we do pay, and you don't do this nonsense here because we believe in free speech. The things that made us great were free speech, and so on. I mean, I think that's really a lot of it. Did you get that feeling when you were in the States? Did anyone mention that?
Well, people have mentioned what's going on back in the UK, but a couple of people said to me, "So I'm really surprised Scotland didn't vote for independence." So that was a nice. They soon changed their minds when I told them what it was actually about. One guy, of course, said to me, "So what did you think of the film Braveheart?" So you can imagine what the reaction was.
Right.
My answer was to that. There was some choice words, and I said what I thought of Mel Gibson, what I thought of the whole premise of the movie, and how it was just rabble-rousing, intended to stir up anti-UK and anti-English rhetoric and hatred. So no, that's what I really got. There wasn't so much about, my God, things are going terribly in the UK, but what I did get a sense of quite strongly was people over there were of the opinion that the UK's economy is in bad shape, and the amount of money, I've got to say where I was, my God, you would not believe that the standard of living. I mean, albeit the cost of living is very high. A bag of groceries is easily $110 easily for a very, very moderate shop. So there's a lot of money there, and the feeling they got was, well, you're not really doing very well over there, are you?
That's the thing. Remember in the old days, you used to always hear about people, they're going off to America or Australia or Canada, and the plumber gets paid $60,000. All this type of stuff. And I think that we're getting back to that kind of thing here. Now, Green MSP Gillian Mackay, who drew up the law, said Vance's claims are nonsense and added that private prayer at home had never been impacted. Now, I decided that I would do some fact-checking. Well, I didn't really do the fact-checking. I just looked up the Guardian. Now, I don't read the Guardian, but anyway, here it was. This is the first link that came up here, and it says register. See, we've registered. All right, anyway. And they said the Abortion Services Safe Access Zones Scotland Act, introduced last year, introduced safe access zones within 200 metres of abortion clinics, banning harassing, alarming or distressing actions. Okay. Silent prayer is listed among the banned activities. Okay. The fact check continues. Silent prayer in a home which caused no distress and alarm to others would not fall under this category. But the point is that someone could report you for causing distress.
Yep.
Right, so let's say you did a silent prayer in your house, and someone who was in your house, either a visitor or a member of your family, reported you. Then that would be correct.
They could say they were distressed or they were alarmed.
Of course, they were distressed or alarmed, and of course, then that's true, isn't it?
Totally. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So basically, it was true.
So it could just have said silent prayer in a home would not fall under this category.
That's right, but
it has to cause no distress and alarm.
That's right.
Well, remember when Hamza was questioned about that, he said, "So you're allowed to be racist in your own home. So you're allowed to be offensive in your own home," and that's what he was making out. That people were actually transgressing by wanting to cause offence in their own homes, which is completely backwards. The point is, people should be allowed to act pretty much the way they want in their own homes. And if people take offence at that, that's not really the fault of the homeowner, depending on what it is.
It's certainly not the government's business.
Absolutely right, indeed. Quite.
This is the kind of thing. Of course, there's a bit of a cross of issues, right? Of course, there's abortion, which the Americans look down on. Certainly American conservatives. There's this idea that a person's home is sacrosanct in the US. The castle doctrine, which means basically someone in many states, which means that someone's in your house, you just kill them. basically.
Yep.
And then,
Well, I
of
mean,
course, they can pretty much.
If they're breaking in.
Well, it doesn't matter. If you feel fear of danger and they're in your house, you can kill them pretty much.
Just on that point, okay, on that very point, and this is not an exaggeration, just to illustrate Mark's point here. I visited a gentleman and his wife in their house in northern Arizona. And he took me down to his little kind of man cave where he's got a pool table and a jukebox and everything. There was a rifle on one wall. There was a rifle on the other wall. And he opened up his safe and he had about 17 handguns, including 2 Magnum 44s, right? All that stuff. And I said, well, that's amazing. So do you have licenses for these? And he said, no, you don't need licenses here.
No, why do you use a license?
Exactly. And he said, secreted about the house, including underneath the living room table, he said he had taped a gun with loaded ammunition so that if he needed to, he could just reach under the table and take aim in his house. And so the guy must have had 20 firearms at least. And you're just thinking, oh boy.
Well, I think it's a very different mindset. I mean, their mindset is, well, it's my house.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And the government has no right to stop me protecting
you have a right to defend yourself.
Defend
Mm-hmm.
myself. Mm-hmm. So that's it. That's the basic part of it. And people say, well, you UK people shouldn't have guns and all this, but you're like, well, why not? Because you think, most people that means you're not responsible enough to use a gun. I don't know. Anyway, that's a very different discussion. Anyway, let's see now. One thing about this. So there was a letter. No, wait a minute. I'm going to show you examples. This is a silent vigil.
Approaching someone, trying to persuade them not to access abortion services, surrounding people as they go in or out of the clinic or the hospital, handing out leaflets, religious preaching, silent vigils. So standing here saying nothing, it's a silent vigil, so it can.
I'm just pointing out that coercion is against the law, and that if anyone wants to come and speak to me, they can. So I'm not doing anything else. Yeah, well,
you seem to believe you're not doing anything wrong, but there's obviously a reason why you're here and why you're in this area. And you in particular, I'm aware that you have been protesting here against abortion before, so I don't understand why you're here in this area again if you're not protesting the same thing.
I'm here to say that if anyone wants to come and speak with me at their own volition, they can.
Yeah.
We're going to advise you to move away from this area just now. This person would advise you to move away.
Right, well,
she's not actually protesting anything. I saw her banner, and all her banner said was, "If you would like to come and speak to me, please come and speak to me."
Oh no, but she's silent. Well, she's
not protesting anything.
She's having silent thoughts that she shouldn't have in the place where she shouldn't have them, and the police are there, right there to tell her that's the case. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. Now,
I think it's just because she's in the area.
Yeah, well, she's within the 200 meters or whatever it is of the abortion clinic.
So nobody can be in that area.
I don't really know. I mean, why these abortion clinics are treated like this way, because it's a free speech issue. If people want to stand outside outside,
well, you're not allowed to harass people.
Well, that's a different.
You wouldn't want to be people harassing you.
But that lady isn't harassing anyone at all. She's putting a message up there, just advertising in a way.
Yeah, she's just saying, if you want to come and speak to me, come and speak to me.
Yeah,
it really is terrible. Now, some other people pointed out on the internet. Where is it here? Oh yes, a letter here, which kind of proves the point. It says, "Where's this? However, activities in private space, such as a house within the area of the protected premises, could be an offence if they can be seen, heard within the zone and are done intentionally or recklessly." Of course, who's going to prove what is done intentionally or recklessly? Basically what you're basically saying there is, if you're in your own house within 200 meters of an abortion clinic, you cannot say, I don't agree with this. Yeah. Right, that's basically what you're saying, because anyone could report you for whatever, for
causing distress.
So JD Vance is 100% correct in this. Now, of course, the other part of this has annoyed all the right kind of people. I wouldn't say the right kind of people, some hideous people. Most notably, in this case, I'm just going to bring out one, which is Neil. I'm not a nationalist, Mackay. Who
indeed,
about on this show. He said that rejecting his hatred should be a badge of honour. He says, let's take no lessons in democracy and freedom from the likes of Vance. well, except for the part where I don't know how many million people voted for him.
74 million or something.
74 million, right? Something like that. And aside from the fact that he wants free speech, and he is from a country that actually has free speech enshrined in its constitution, but I mean, of course, he doesn't want that democracy. You know, who would want that? And then the other classic that comes
He wants the SNP type where you're not even allowed to ask questions in the Scottish Parliament.
Well, exactly, Mary. That's exactly right. And he says, when it comes to free speech, remember that the Trump administration has banned the Associated Press from the Oval Office as it uses the term Gulf of Mexico, not MAGA's Orwellian name change Gulf of America. It's like, how can you load up such utter nonsense like this? Total misunderstanding what free speech is. You don't have to listen to people or accept anyone else, but AP are welcome to call the place whatever they do. And Trump is quite in his rights to tell him to F off for not doing it. Anyway, but the thing is, the answer to all this, of course, is that Mackay does know what free speech is, but he just doesn't want you to have it. That's what it comes down to. Right? He wants him to have it. He wants to be able to sit there and call Vance a hater and whatever it is. It's all screed here in this article. Unbelievable, just unbelievable screed of hatred, actually, that I was quite surprised that the paper actually even printed, because not fact-free as well. But the idea is that, he just wants his side to be able to lie just with impunity. And if you say anything against them, then they will get the police on your tail. And that's that. So anyway, we have to stop that. I think this is just this kind of idea. And the other thing about this article was we can even if Vance was promoting hate, well, the answer isn't more hate to hate him back. No. The answer is to try and understand where he's coming from and all this type of stuff. Not interested in that. They want to keep the hate machine going so they can get clicks, make more money, and keep in their cushy jobs as columnists. Don't you think, David?
Absolutely. I mean, the left's big thing about Trump, and this is one thing I did notice about America, is most people dislike him because of his personal traits, because he's like an odious character. He's an unpleasant businessman, very ruthless. He's put a lot of businesses, a lot of companies out of business with his failure to pay, allegedly, and that kind of stuff. And of course, he's been misogynist. So it's that is the reason that's being used why people dislike him. But surely the way to deal with someone who is a hateful person is not to hate them back. It's it maintains the cycle of hate, really, you would think. But really, the opposition to him is visceral over there. It's not logical. It's just, I hate him. He's a whatever. And they use these appalling swear words to describe him. Some sensible people, who are more measured might say, well, actually, in terms of growing the economy, he'll probably do a better job and he might help with wars and stuff. But people actually do hate him. And as for Mackay, you're quite right about Mackay. I've always thought he's a dreadful journalist, right from the days when he was editor in the Sunday Herald. The quality of his writing has always been poor. But to me, he's the worst type of nationalist because he's Irish. He's an Irish nationalist who's in Scotland trying to foment trouble against the UK, but using Scotland as a battleground. And I detest that. I think
it's really wrong. It's a horrible thing, and so self-righteous about it as well, that they're in the right. I mean, that's why I do think we have to put an end to this and just say no. It doesn't work this way anymore. It might have worked up to now, and that's one of the things about the Trump administration. I think is quite something. No, it doesn't work that way anymore. We're going to do things differently. This is not the thing. And we've had too much of this nonsense for the past 20 years, however many years, 20 years in the UK, particularly Europe, and then, of course, in America as well. And it's not getting us anywhere. Everything's declining, and that's part of the reason. Right, short break, and we'll be back. David is going to talk about Labour, like being hit by a meteorite in the polls, that type of thing. Okay. A polling meteorite, I'm not too sure. But anyway, disaster and making a giant crater in the ground. David, there you go.
Indeed. So, as we all know, the Westminster Labour government has made, I think, what could best be described as a faltering start to its first term in office since 2010. I think that's putting it very mildly. Now, this is a real concern for us of a anti-nationalist bent up here ahead of the Holyrood election in May 2026. Whatever you think of Labour, a poll just this week, latest poll, showed Scottish Labour on track to take 18% of the vote. And further on track to win 18 seats in the Holyrood 2026 election. This would be down from the 21.59% of the vote they took 4 years ago, which gave them a massive 2 out of 73 constituency seats and 20 list seats in addition, of course. So the real danger is that far from forming the next government, which is what Sarwar had been boasting about quite openly in Holyrood until very recently, Labour may actually lose ground on the 22 seats, the pretty poor showing they made in 2021 when they had I think the lowest ever proportion of the vote in Holyrood since 1999. Now, what can Labour do to hold this? Well, so far this week, we've seen a little bit of a change of tack from Anas Sarwar and Jackie Baillie. A huge criticism that's often levelled, and rightly so, I would have to say, at Anas Sarwar is that he whipped his MSPs to back the SNP's gender recognition reform bill, and any MSPs who didn't lost their front bench seats and were relegated to the back benches. So he really took it seriously. Yesterday, however, only 2 years later, on the Holyrood Sources podcast, which is that thing with Jeff Aberdeen and Andy McKee, Anas admitted he would not have voted for the GRR bill if he had known then what he knows now. Right, okay, fine. So I'm not sure what exactly it is that Anas has discovered about human biology.
Isn't it a dentist or something? Maybe you should know that, the difference between a man and a woman.
Exactly, but just look at the polls very quickly. 2 polls this week, which made very grim reading, but this touches on another point. The latest Westminster opinion poll from YouGov said that Reform, this is nationwide, of course, it says, how would you vote in the next Westminster election? People were asked throughout the UK. Reform, 27%. Labour, 25%. So Reform in the lead for the first time, probably. This is 21, Liberal Democrats, Green, 9 for the Greens. Liberal Democrats, 14, 9 for the Greens. And out of interest, what it further extrapolated was in Scotland, what that would mean in terms of votes won. Now, there were 2 polls. One said the SNP would win 38 seats. Another said the SNP would win 44 seats. Both said that Liberal Democrats would win 6 and Conservatives 5, which leaves Labour between 2 and 8 seats in Holyrood, in Westminster, falling down from the 37 or whatever it is they currently have. I mean, this is an absolute wipeout for the Labour Party. So what can Anas do rather than trying to revise his position on one of the most controversial and hated, frankly, pieces of legislation in the history of devolution? What else can he do? Or is next year's election a lost cause for Labour? Mark, what's your feeling?
Well, I think it's overstated at the moment. I think, first of all, there is, of course, the backlash. This is the first thing that's happened, is a backlash against Labour, and they still have to prove themselves. Now, that may not happen. They may not be able to prove themselves as well. But I mean, people really going to go, I'm going to go back to the SNP? I don't know. It's like they've not. Who are the people they would be voting for? They'd be voting for all those has-beens again. I don't know. I can't see that. That's one thing, and I can't see them to say going back and. They might. I think people may in polls go, it sounds like a good idea. I don't really like Labour right now. I'll go back to the SNP. But I think when it comes to the actual ballot box, I think it'll be quite something different. Now, I did notice this thing in that article about the majority. It said they would have a majority of seats. The SNP would have a majority in the next if they won, and I think that's. I still don't think that's going to happen. But even if it did happen, there was a majority. They said that the majority would be 1 seat. It's like they're not going to be able to do anything with that. I mean, it's nonsense, and they wouldn't be able to do anything if it had even bigger majority. So I think this idea that we should be scared of an SNP Green coalition going on for another 4 years, it's not desirable.
No,
but I mean, I don't think that's the thing. I just don't think that it's going to happen that way. I think Labour have got enough time to bring back more, to get more ground back, and we don't know what the events are going to be coming up. Perhaps that maybe I'm optimistic, maybe not, but I don't think it matters too much either way. Perhaps
possibly a lot of people do say that to me. I mean, my concern with Labour, as I'm sure I've articulated many times, is if you look at the breakdown of Scottish constituencies, albeit there were outliers, if you like, in 2017, 2019 and 2021, where the Conservatives took over in second place in many seats, but didn't get anywhere close to winning any of them, really. So what that means is in the bulk, and I'm talking between 70 and 80% of Scottish constituency seats, only Labour can beat the SNP. We're talking here about, west of Scotland and Glasgow, central Scotland, places like, Glenrothes and Dumbarton and Paisley and Greenock and Kilwinning and places like that, Irvine. you're not going to get a Conservative Party win there. You're not going to get a Reform Party win there either. So it's either going to be SNP or Labour. And people can say what they like about Labour, but if you're faced with a choice, as I believe we are, of having either Anna Sarwar or John Swinney as First Minister for the next 5 years, people are going to have to make their minds up what they want here, because it's going to be one or the other. It's certainly not going to be the leader of Reform. I mean, 95% of the people watching this couldn't even tell us who the leader of Reform in Scotland is right now.
I can't even remember his name. And, it's Martin something or other.
It's Martin Green. Now,
right, okay, that's it,
Martin,
yes.
but he's just, as he acknowledges, as I speak to him, he acknowledges they're going to have to get themselves more on the front foot, because they're not going to be the party of government next year in Scotland. We've got to face the reality here. They're not. Put it this way, there's a by-election in Kilmarnock East tomorrow. I would say wherever Reform finishes in that's where they'll finish in the Holyrood election next year.
This is a prediction, I see.
Oh, what's this? Say that again?
Just saying, there's a by-election in Kilmarnock East tomorrow. Okay, so wherever Reform finishes tomorrow in Kilmarnock East, that's where they'll finish in next year's Holyrood election as a party.
Okay. Now, of course, we have to look as well that we have seen in actual polling.
Yeah,
and in the form of elections, by-elections, SNP get hammered every time. So I think this. I mean, you said this. Voters are going to Labour voters, or people, let's say left of centre voters, are going to vote and say, right, who am I going to vote for? I'm going to vote for Labour, and it's still the same calculus as last time. But Labour is still part of the bigger thing. And what's the SNP got? Can't get independence. So where are they going? And they've turned the country into a basket case. So. I just don't see it.
I was going to say, Mr. Tommy Boy, he says the biggest issue for me is there is nothing positive to vote for, so people won't bother voting.
Oh, yes,
that's a real concern, because if that's the case, that's when a party gets in with almost no share of the vote at all.
Yes.
Labour get in with 30%.
Well, people I would say Reform voters are enthused, so that's true. Now, Sarwar thinks he'll come back, and he thinks that he's doing that, but he needs to do it a bit more, I think, get a bit out in front of this a bit more.
Yeah.
And I've noticed a lot of this, you're taking orders from Starmer and all this branch office. Now, you have to get away from all that as well.
David, Jackie Knox is saying the Reform candidate in Kilmarnock has withdrawn from the by-election.
Well, there was a big storm. They found some tweets. I think it was a lady, some tweets or Facebook posts that she'd put up in 2016. And, the usual sanctimonious, self-righteous opponent said, "This is a disgrace. Nigel Farage should insist this person throw it." I can't even remember what it was that she'd said, but there was a little bit of a storm there. So I didn't know that. I was reading this week that Reform was standing. I actually didn't know that, but I know there was a little bit of a storm about their candidate. So maybe polling didn't look good, or maybe she just didn't fancy the bad publicity. I'm not sure. So I'll make another prediction the next time there's a by-election.
Right, on the button right there, mistake DG. Right, okay.
Just a bit cloudy there, guys. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yes, exactly. Right, very good. All right, so will he come back? Will he not? Will he make more of a stance? Does it really matter? I don't know at the moment. There's a lot of confusion. All the balls are in the air, as they say. Where they'll come down, nobody knows. I could make some rude joke about that, but I won't. Anyway, I will talk about the fact that you should buy one of these T-shirts. Look at this. That's amazing, isn't it? Look at that. Abolish Holyrood. That will shock your friends.
Oh, it won't shock them as much as it used to would have shocked them.
Well, that's true, but still, it'll be like, oh, amazing. You think that amazing thought. Yeah. How could you be a thought leader? And you get praise from your friends eventually once they figure out that you're in the right, of course. And you'll disappoint your enemies. Disappoint, that's right. You'll annoy your enemies, and that's even better. All at the majority shop. You can get a coupon down there, show 10, it says to do that. I don't think most people use the coupon, but please do buy some merchandise. It's great stuff. Anyway, and they're great quality, these. Actually fantastic. Right.
Mark wears that 24 hours a day.
I do. I'd like to wear it more. I need to get Abolish Holyrood pajamas. That's really to get going. Right, Mary is going to be back in a second to talk about immigration. Please do remember to like and subscribe, and thank you all for watching with us so far. Right, Mary, and I'll do your stuff.
Thank you, and the captain. Okay, so John Swinney and the SNP's plans for boosting immigration took a big hit this week as a Norstat poll commissioned by The Times shows that more than 3/4, actually it was 77%, of voters in Scotland said they wanted immigration to decrease or just continue at the current levels. Only 23% of people said that they wanted immigration to actually increase. So this is a blow to the SNP's demands for more power over immigration. They are seeking, the SNP, they are seeking full power over immigration policy through independence, which the party says would allow the Scottish Government to build asylum and immigration, my page, hold on, systems to meet Scotland's needs and founded on fairness and human rights. Anyway, the poll basically was, the people were asked, taking everything into account, would you prefer to see an increase or a decrease in the number of people moving to Scotland from other countries outside the UK? Only 6% said that they would want a major increase. 17% said an increase. So that's the 23%.
Yep.
43% of people said neither an increase or a decrease. And 18% said decrease, and 15% said a major increase.
Yes.
Okay. So the net migration figure for Scotland in the last year that we have, which was up to mid-2022, it said that 55,000 people had come into Scotland. So there's people leaving, there's people coming in, but there was a net gain of 55,000 people. That's the population of Hamilton coming in every year to Scotland. So the thing I don't understand about this poll, I know that people are saying we don't want an increase, but 43% of people said that they want that to continue.
Yeah.
And we're in the middle of a housing emergency.
It's unbelievable, isn't it, really?
I just don't get it. I mean, where do they think that they're going to be building a new Hamilton like every year? It's ridiculous. Anyway, so support for a cut in immigration is, as you might expect, strongest among Reform UK voters. 71% of Reform voters want immigration cut. So I would say that's the main reason why people would vote Reform is immigration.
That's the headline issue, isn't it?
Yeah. And people who are over 35, 40% of them want it cut as well. I guess people who are younger, they're more amenable to immigration. So as far as Labour and Conservative voters are concerned, they're basically the same. 38% want less immigration.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's an awful lot less than Reform on the 71%.
Yeah, but still, yes, maybe perhaps all the people who really care about immigration as an issue have gone to Reform, leaving the Conservative and Labour fairly similar on the issue. I mean, I think there is definitely, we talked about this with Craig a little bit last week. There's definitely an issue going on here, and I think people are not against immigration as such, but they want to have controls on it. That's the thing. Who's coming in? What do they contribute, or what are they going to contribute? Now, of course, many immigrants do. We never fail to say, myself and Mary were immigrants to Japan and the States as well. We tried our best to contribute to those societies. But there are many people who don't contribute, and this idea that you can bring people can bring their families over and can get citizenship with a very short period of time. This is not good at all. It takes ages to become a citizen in America. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I think here it's only 5 years, isn't it?
5 years you leave to remain, then you can bring your family on, and anyone, they automatically become British citizens. As well. So it's like these kind of things are like, this is the kind of thing I was talking about earlier. We've had all this kind of stuff going on for 20 years or whatever long, even longer in many cases. Time to put an end to it, and to actually get something that's sensible, common sense policies we want. But the problem is there's so much ideology around it, certainly on the left. It's like, we need to bring the world in here because we're good people. It was like, no, it's not. That's not what it's about. You need to be more diverse. No, we don't need to do that. We need to look after.
Well, I think a lot of people are just wanting cheap labour.
Well,
or they think they can get cheap labour.
And the Tories are particularly bad for that as well, and that's not good to put people to work here. And train them and so on and do those type of things.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it in terms of adding like a Hamilton, in Scotland, I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, you're right. There's absolutely no headroom for that. Whatever, it's ludicrous. And where would the facilities go to? And where would they come from just to maintain that? It's just impossible. And doing that every year, guys.
Every year. So we've got a housing emergency. We've
Yep.
got our national health services overrun.
Exactly.
I mean, it's at the verge of collapse.
Yep.
We've got our schools are full. And basically, services can't cater for the number of people we've got, but we're going to add another.
Yeah.
No.
All these people are happy for it, to add another 55,000 people every
And then you
year.
shut it down as being racist if you even just put your hand up against it.
It's true. And let's not forget the SNP and Greens are saying we have to do this to grow the economy. We have to boost immigration to grow the economy. Wow. Did any of you see debate night on that subject, incidentally? Is it Karen Rundell, the girl from Chewing the Fat? She was on,
Karen Dunbar.
Karen Bar, that's her, sorry, her, right. And she said, and they were asking, how are we going to grow the economy? And her view was, well, I'd like to ask, why do we want to grow the economy? Ha, ha, ha. I mean, why? What, shouldn't be getting away from a reliance on economics and capitalism?
Well, generally, I tend to try and not take my political advice from actors.
Absolutely. But the Conservative guy sitting next door said, well, I'll tell you why you might want to grow the economy, maybe so that it will enable the private sector to provide the jobs and the resultant tax, which will enable us to fund public services. What do you think, Karen? Is that a good idea? Something like that. I thought, absolute fool.
No idea how it works.
No idea how it works. So, they're just in their own wee world. Anyway, talking about being in their own wee world, we'll be back shortly to talk about that. But before then, we have things you can do right now to support that. Mary, that was a great segment. Well done there. And we'll, of course, this is an ongoing issue. We'll be talking about this more and more as time goes on. What it says here, discuss, is this going to be an important issue in the elections next year? Yeah, David, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's becoming more and more of an issue here in Scotland. We don't really, I think, feel the pain that they do in, for example, the south of England, and certainly the East Midlands of England's very big on immigration. Also, certainly some towns in the northwest of England, in addition. So it's much more of an issue there. But in Scotland, it will become more so if we see more scenes of, for example, hotels with migrants, or asylum seekers and that sort of stuff. It will become an issue, unquestionably, and that's not down to racism or anything else. Overseas people assimilate very well, very readily in Scotland, and they're accepted and welcomed very much. But there are limits. You can't, as Mary said. I mean, there really is a finite limit to the number of people you can bring in as an addition to already stretched public services, and that's a fact.
Yeah, and of course the irony is, if you say to any SNP person that wants immigration, you say, well, why don't we attract more English people to Scotland?
Yeah, right.
Then basically run away in horror. You're like, okay, now we know what's going on. All right, okay.
Right.
Things you can do to support the show. You can buy a T-shirt or a mug. Look at this. Oh, there it comes. Abolish Hollywood. Amazing. You can subscribe to the show on YouTube, or you can drop a like. Just hit that smash, as they say. As the kids say, smash that like button. You can tell your friends about us, and you can also do all of the above, which makes us feel extremely happy and fulfilled, underlined exclamation mark. Coming up, it's a moment you've all been waiting for, the highlight of the week. It is Zoomer of the Week.
Yay!
Helps if I go to the page. All right, my Zoomer, Penny Farquharson, who, as many of you will know, is we call him the Times Peas chief. Now, he gets a lot of negative comments under every article recently. I think he might get the message. David, didn't you talk about him a few weeks ago?
I did. This is when he said, what we need in Scotland is an SNP Labour coalition to beat reform.
That's right, that was that one.
Yeah, well,
right,
analysed, Jenny. Yeah, well done, brilliant.
But, usually maybe every week, he comes out with some absolute guff. But anyway, yesterday, I believe, he did surpass himself in an article entitled, Our SNP Leaders Must Accept the Financial Price of Peace. He asks, what should John Swinney say when asked about Keir Starmer's plan to send British troops to Ukraine? This is the headline. Our SNP leaders. It seems a bit weird anyway, just to begin with. And now we can debate Starmer's policy all day long. I don't know if this is a policy yet or just a suggestion. Anyway, I think most British people unwilling to go to, most British youngsters unwilling to go into Ukraine meat grinder. Others may disagree about the value of that. But the point here is, why does Swinney have anything to say at all? Because he doesn't. Isn't he the leader of a devolved regional administration that has no remit on foreign policy? Not according to our Kenny, and I quote, "In the real world, Swinney cannot simply avoid the question. For one thing, he is the putative premier of an independent Scottish state and commander-in-chief of its army, navy and air force."
God help us.
Scots have,
Commander-in-Chief.
Scots have a right to know how this SNP leader reads the present international crisis.
I think we should surrender now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we give in.
I love how Kenny starts with with "in the real world."
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then leaves
as opposed to the world that he's in most of the time.
In the real world. It's like, in the real world, John Swinney is a serial loser in a parliament of losers. But to mega appeaser Kenny, he's a putative president to an independent Scottish state. Oh, that sounds so grand. Just one question. If the Scottish Parliament cannot run a referendum on breaking up the UK, how can Scotland become independent?
No, you can't even run a census, never mind a war.
It's, just a minor detail that these journalists should know. Of course, they all know this. They all know that there's no chance of a referendum happening again, or no chance of an independent state. But they continue because they're taking us all for mugs so they can get clicks and make money. Anyway, but in what universe, no, not even a universe, what multiverse does John Swinney get to be the president of this fantasy state and become the commander-in-chief of what? Of his army, navy, and air force?
We got a few fishing boats.
Yeah, right.
What air force? What navy?
They still have those rowing boats down at Queen's Park in Glasgow. Maybe he could be in charge of them. That would
I don't think so.
A few Bravehearts with some of the big swords.
We don't even have ferries to defend ourselves with.
This is Brigadoon levels of delusion. High quality Zoomerism brought to you from the Times Ivory Tower, powered by unicorn farts and spouted by my Zoomer of the Week, Kenny. Away with the fairies. It's non. I mean, it's like. I mean, I just can't think. An actual adult wrote that.
Someone he got paid to write it. He didn't just write it. He got paid.
There's a chain as well. People looking at it. He wrote it. The editor went, "Okay, fine. This is great. You're great, Kenny. Great stuff. Here's your money." And everyone involved is like,
I think in answer to this, the Scottish Navy will be docked at Strathclyde Park on the loch.
Anyway, very amusing. Okay, right.
Good old Kenny.
I know. Next up is David Zoomer.
My nomination for Zoomer is, just for a change, former SNP MP Joanna Cherry. Again,
what's Joe up to this week?
Right, you might remember, was it 2 weeks ago? Was it 2 weeks ago I was last on the show? Whenever it was, anyway.
3 weeks. 3 weeks ago.
So it's every week now. I find myself responding to tweets from recently reappointed, let's not forget, King's Counsel, Joe Cherry, who lost her seat in Edinburgh at the last election. The reason being, Joe continually provides a revisionist version of her time as an MP, and the theme is the same every single tweet. Something has happened, and the decisions been made by the SNP leadership, and it's led to a difficult situation for the party. And this always provokes Joe's anger. And on she comes to tell us all that years ago, she heroically and single-handedly challenged the SNP leader, be it past or present, but he or she refused to listen. And if only he or she had listened to Joe, everything would have been fine. We must
have missed all that.
Exactly. But I didn't miss it because I'm not sure it ever happened. But this week, Joe's given us this particular party piece of hers on several topics. So this week it was the Scottish Government mouthing platitudes about women's rights while fighting a court case arguing against these rights. She feels it's just not good enough. Right, fine, thank you for that, Joe. John Swinney's refusal to meet with women / LGB, not just LGB, not LGBT groups, to discuss single-sex spaces. despite Joe asking him to do so. Of course, Joe, obviously he would ask him to do it, of course. And most notably, of course, though, this week, Audrey Nicholl. You remember Audrey Nicholl, the girl that Stephen Flynn phoned and said, right, I want you to step down because I want your seat. Remember that story? And then he was talked out of it, and the legislation was brought in to stop anyone from Westminster actually standing in Holyrood unless they first relinquished their...
Good job, Flynn.
Exactly, right. So Flynn, this is what he had done. He wanted to sit in her seat. So this week, Audrey was interviewed by the Times, and she said, well, I'm stepping down at the next election. And they said, so what about this stuff with Flynn? She said, well, he phoned me up and he made it quite clear that he was a man going places and he wanted to go up to Holyrood because that's how he was going to become leader of the party. So he tried to urge me to stand down. Now, this is it. So she was describing how it felt as a woman to be told this by, a quite aggressive younger man. Joe, remember, let's not forget, is a great champion of women's rights. So she keeps telling us. So Joe tweeted about this. And what did she say in response to a 64-year-old female MSP's description of a senior, albeit younger, male party member attempting to bounce her out of her democratically elected seat? Joe tweeted, what's so sad about this is it is all about personalities and their right to a seat. There's nothing about their vision for their country, policy issues, or independence. That was it. So no question of, my God, this is terrible. Bounce a woman out. She's just saying, oh, yeah, well, I know this is all unfortunate. I know you're after a seat, but let's not forget independence is the prize here. And I thought, you absolute phony. And this is why I call her out. Champion of women's rights. Forget it. It's an absolute flag of convenience and nothing more. She's just another grubby nationalist and a revisionist fraud, and she couldn't give two monkeys for the rights of any woman that isn't her. That's an absolute disgrace. And as long as she keeps pushing her fake memoirs in a failed attempt to whitewash her soiled reputation, I'm going to keep calling her out. And that is why, yet again, Ms. Cherry, you are my Zoomer.
Oh, that was good. That was very good. That was good. Now, when she posts those things, I've been posting this meme. I don't know if you've seen it here. This is the angry goose meme. Weren't you a member of the SNP? Weren't you a member of the SNP? So that's the thing, So I posted, and I actually saw it because she commented on it. I can't remember what she said. She said, well, they don't understand what's
not him again.
Yeah. That account, I think she said. Anyway, weren't you an SNP MP? Okay. Yes. Oh, the SNP is terrible. Well, you were part of it.
That's the thing. She's still a party member after all this. She hated every single leader. She talks about all these guys who are lick spittles and all this Sturgeon. Yeah. She slags her off every week. She slags off Swinney. Now she slagged him off this week for not meeting her when he said. And I said to her, you know what, Joe? You've obviously got all the answers. Why didn't you run for party leader? Seriously, But I really like Forbes. To me, she's just a complete fraud. She's an educated woman, an intelligent woman, and she's pushing this complete nonsense about independence. She knows it would never work. She knows we couldn't possibly afford it. And in the meantime, she's donning this women's rights cloak, except she doesn't believe in it at all, as this can be clearly seen. I cannot respect someone who I feel has no integrity, and that's her. So, yeah.
Right. You're getting a lot of support here, David, I have to say.
Go on. Brilliant.
Right. Okay. Very good. That was good. A moment of calm now.
Serenity now.
Yes. Yeah. And Mary's up next.
Okay. My Zoomer of the week is our Public Finance Minister, Ivan McKee.
Oh.
He is moaning that Scots always blame the Scottish Government for issues with the council tax system. I guess his £110,000 salary, you're not supposed to complain about anything. Anyway, he says, we get criticised whatever we do about it. Well, I would like to make it a bit more accurate and say they get criticised for what they don't do about it.
Right.
He seems to forget that the SNP were the ones who promised to abolish it nearly 2 decades ago.
Sure.
Right.
And the only thing that seems to be happening is that Shona Robertson has announced another talking shop, as you mentioned earlier, Mark.
Yes.
The talking shops. Well, they've announced another talking shop on reforming council tax. She says to make it fairer. It's like 20 years, and this is where we're at. If you remember, last year, Ivan McKee claimed he was reforming Scotland's bloated public sector by cutting jobs, but figures showed that the Scottish Government's total workforce had actually increased, hitting its highest total ever on record. So his big announcement the other day was that he's now trying to reduce the numbers by implementing recommendations from a report published 14 years ago. Is that how long it takes them? They sit in a report for 14 years before they start to implement anything. He's already boasted, an error about the numbers coming down, and now he's starting to. They do it. Everything's arse backwards, It's like
true.
now they're starting to talk about actually implementing any of the things. Anyway, the public sector workforce costs are completely out of control in Scotland. 22% of people work in the public sector, and it's costing us £27 billion a year. There's actually Stephen Daisley wrote an article in the Spectator today, if anyone would like some further reading. The problem is Ivan McKee and his ilk are not going to sort it out.
No.
And I would like to suggest that they adopt as their theme tune Too Much, Too Little, Too Late.
Yeah, very good.
If anyone remembers that from...
I remember that, yeah, too, yeah.
Denise Williams and Johnny Mathis, 1978.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's why he's my Zoomer of the week, because he just spouts. He should know better, because he did do the same course that we did at university, Mark, which was quite a high-level course. Right. But he doesn't seem to...
Well, ideology will get in the way of common sense every time. This is the thing. This is the problem here. We have this people captured by a mind virus, nationalist mind virus. I will copyright that. Nationalist mind virus. It's got into our country, and then it's infected people who would otherwise be actually probably okay, just be going on with Labour or whatever it is, or Tories, fine, whatever. But because they've been forced into this nationalist bucket with the other crabs, they're all first of all climbing about, fighting with each other. But they don't talk any sense. I'm not saying crabs don't talk sense. Crabs might talk sense, but moving on.
Might talk more sense.
David is going to decide.
Oh, am I deciding? My goodness me! Right, okay. McKee's strong candidate, but no, I'm not going to give it to McKee. So I almost never give it to myself. I'm going to give it to Farquharson because he's an absolute.
Oh, that's good. We can get onto him on Twitter as well.
He's a true Zoomer, and Joe Cherry's just a constant disappointment. I mean, it's not even Zoomerism; it's just stupidity. So no, let's give it to Kenny because he writes writes more rubbish about independence than anyone else, and he single-handedly tries to keep the independence industry going, and particularly his part in it. So yeah, definitely.
I know it's kind of weird because he says he's not a nationalist.
Oh yeah,
I don't mean that in the sense of what and
the Pope's not a Catholic. Yeah.
Like what's his name? What's Neil? I'm not a nationalist. Mackay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, actually, is a nationalist, pretended not to be a nationalist. Whereas Farquharson is supposedly a unionist, what he calls himself. Yeah. But is actually a nationalist.
Yeah, I'm convinced he is. Yeah, nothing will convince me.
Every article, a person who was not a nationalist would not write these ridiculous articles.
If it walks like a duck or whatever.
Oh, that's right. The duck.
Exactly right.
Whatever. Anyway, okay, good. I don't think he's been nominated many times. I don't actually think he's won.
He's won many. Oh, interesting.
I think he's won a few because there's been so many nominations. Right. But well done, Mark.
Anyway, we do need better journalists in this country. Put this obsession behind you, please. Move on.
Yeah.
Let us move on. It's like, what's that? It's like self-care. Be kind to yourself. Forgive yourself.
Yes.
Move on, please. All right. We're so happy to have you all with us on the show every week on Scotland's #1 Politics Chat. We will see you same time, same place next Wednesday. And the thought for the week is from the American writer P.J. O'Rourke, who says, "My freedom of speech stimulates your freedom to tell me I'm wrong." Well, think about that. We'd rather have our ideas challenged. We'd rather have our ideas challenged and thereby strengthened than shut our opponents up through weakness. Thank you all for your support. It's been a good one tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've enjoyed doing it. Thank you, huge thank you for the returnee, David.
Mike, great to be back, guys. I did enjoy contributing from out there, but it's no place like home, So.
Oh, yes, that's good. And a huge thank you to Mary and to everyone doing the chat.
Thank you, everyone for your donations, and thank you for all your comments.
And thank you, Doug, for that super sticker there. That is great. Thank you very much. We will appreciate it. We put that into the majority Truthbot, who will soon be rampaging around the internet. So thank you. Good night from me, and good night from all of them as well. Thanks a lot.
Good night.
Good night, guys.
Oh, I'm so depressed.